You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Powered by FanthaTracks.com. It's the Fantha from Down Under.
G'day, mate. How you going? This is the Fantha from Down Under, brought to you by, of course, Fantha Tracks Radio. And here we are going to be celebrating some Star Wars tonight with my other brothers from another channel. That is, of course, Kyle Wagner and, of course, Kevin, the Radio Nerd Reitzel. Mate, how are you, guys? Let's start with you, Kev.
Oh, doing good, man. It's nice to be on Fantha here and talking some Star Wars, specifically Solo.
Nice. And Kyle, how the hell are you, mate? How you doing?
Wait. This isn't. Are you telling me this isn't a Miami Vice podcast?
Blue is in Clarellian too, eh?
What is this? A Glenn Fry song? What's going on? It's a different Smuggler's Blues. See if your listeners get that one.
Nice. If you're a muso, you'll get the reference, folks. All right, folks, we are going to be chatting a bit of Han Solo tonight, and one of our first questions is going to be for the boys where they first caught up the coolness of Han Solo as a character. Kev, let's take it away with you.
Cantina scene in the original Star Wars, not Star Wars A New Hope, when we saw it in the theater when I was 6. And then went back and watched it several times, and him shooting Greedo first. you know, but I mean, go back a few scenes before that, though, where you see just Han Solo sitting in that little alcove in the cantina and just looking as cool as ever.
And Kyle, what about you, mate? When did you know he was cool?
Come on, Kevin, nailed it. It's right in that cantina scene. He shoots first, and that is the way it is. Sorry, people, there is no other version of that. Han shoots first, but another scene that I always kind of liked with him, where he kind of showed his cool, was when he was trying to convince Luke Skywalker to maybe join the crew. He's good with a blaster, and it's a lightsaber and stuff like that. Just like, hey, just ride with me, kid. It'll all be good. But no. And of course, too, I think one of my all-time favorite Han Solo moments is we're all right here. Just trying to lock it down. Cool. There's a little bit of cool there, but you can tell he's flustered too, which kind of just, I think, shows another side of him that actually he's pretty, I think in a way is just as much known for as the Han Solo coolness.
Oh, totally. You know what I think is one of the better ones for me is a smaller scene, is when we're first hearing about the Millennium Falcon from him, and he's bringing up, oh, this is the greatest ship ever, blah blah blah, and then we finally see it in that docking bay, and he starts going, oh well, it needs a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and he straight away he's a ship's mechanic at heart. He's somebody that's pulling apart the car in the garage. He's like the old dad that wanted to rebuild the V8 and put the all the spin on things to make it faster. Kev, can we relate to that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, those particular scenes in the original Star Wars are really what are starting to define this character. But one of my favorite scenes actually is in Return of the Jedi. I mean, obviously he's got some fun action scenes and they're at the bunker and all that kind of stuff. But the scene that I really like, that I appreciated much later, is something that I think men or people in general can learn from when they watch someone and they understand someone's reactions and body language. And that's the scene just after Leia has the talk with Luke and starts understanding the truth of everything. And Luke walks away and Han Solo's there with her in the Ewok village, and he gets a little defensive, like, oh, you can tell Luke? And then he throws his hand down and says, and he starts to walk away, and then Leia's, like, distraught, and he senses that, and he's like, this is where I got to kind of man up and be the person that I think I need to be to Princess Leia. And this helps. This scene's important, too, because it really brings them together. And then later on, of course, they share a kiss, and Han finds out about the whole thing with, brother and sister. But that was just an important character developing scene of Han Solo, that he just wasn't this swashbuckler guy, that he is someone that can be relied on and be loved.
Kevin, I was just going to say, Kevin, After all that, hold me.
You know, Cole, I've got to ask you now that Kevin's done it, what's the most tender moment for Han Solo?
Tender moment for Han Solo. That's an interesting question, because I mean that scene is up there, but I think there's a couple of scenes when they land on the quote unquote asteroid in Empire between him and Leia that he's kind of tender. You see him kind of showing his softer side, but in a seductive kind of way. I tell him, well, you kind of like the scoundrel, don't you?
Stop, Kyle. Stop it. Kyle, I'm gonna need you to turn down the smolder, okay?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, it's hard, man. It's a hard thing to do. I'm just understand. But I think that's one of the things about Han Solo that makes him stand out so much in the Star Wars universe, because I think he is the most personality-wise diverse character in the Star Wars films. I think you see more sides of Han Solo than you do any of the other main characters in the Star Wars, or at least in the original trilogy. I don't know if you guys would agree with that or not.
I think to a certain degree you're right, and that this is one of the reasons why we got a Solo movie to kind of flush out his backstory and how he became the man that he became in the original trilogy. And I think that Alden Ehrenreich did a great job of capturing that character. And, whether it was meeting Chewbacca for the first time and becoming friends with him, or learning a lesson from a fellow scoundrel about trusting people and not trusting people.
What's interesting too is I think one of the hearts of this character as, not just a soldier, pilot, somebody that's out there doing the work. He's somebody that's always in over his head. I think that's the one. He's always looking for the deal that's too big. One of the perfect examples of that is in the first of the new sequel trilogy films, where obviously he's being hunted down, and even Chewbacca says to him, well, in his own way, that he's not able to always talk his way out of things, Not the bounty hunters don't believe it, and Chewie's like, yeah, no, you don't always talk your way out of it, Han.
And this here's how you can find the Fantha from Down Under on the World Wide Web. You can catch Adam O'Brien, the Fantha from Down Under, at The Lethal Mullet on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also catch him on the Lethal Mullet podcast on Phantom Podcast Network. You can also catch him on Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast on Phantom Podcast Network. You can also catch him at The Mullet Guild on the Phantom Podcast Network at fpnet.podbean.com. Be sure to check out all the listings there and subscribe for the great shows also at phantomtracks.com. It's all your Star Wars news in a single file.
One of the great things about this character is he's like a used car salesman. He's always trying to get the deal that's too big for him and, of course, his place in the universe. He's always trying to get too much when, obviously, he's not reaching far enough to get it. Perfect example of that is, of course, in Force Awakens, where he is even told by Chewbacca, he's not always able to talk his way out of things. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's one of the things that kind of defined his character, even with the Solo movie, pun intended. That he doesn't really plan everything out. He likes to fly by the seat of his pants and figure it out on the way. Like he knows he wants to get from point A to point B, but he doesn't really know which direction to go, and he just, that's why he says, "Oh, we'll talk our way out of it." That's just because one of the many things that he's always been good at. But that's one of the things we find charming about him.
And Cole, do you think that's one of the defining characteristics of his relationship also with Lando is that Lando also tries that, probably goes big grander, but also fails?
Well, first of all, did you guys hear that? That was a thermal detonator. So be nice, but no, I think that's one of the things. And actually, you know what? In truth, I think the relationship that you saw between Lando and Han and Solo was so much better than what we saw in the films, but because there was a sense of one-upsmanship between them, which I think they were able to expand on more because of the Solo films. But yeah, I think that's one of the best things that happened because we got the Solo film was really expanding on that Han and Lando relationship and how that came about. And I hate you, man.
So with that too, you got to think about this is a character that's obviously had a change we've seen through now the canon story of the Solo movie, but something interesting that we talked about off air is the backstory that he had before that. And of course that was in the A.C. Crispin series of novels, starting with Paradise Snare, and of course Hutt Gambit and Rebel Dawn. Now, Kev, you know this series. To Hutt, this is one that sort of shows the character going from a real rags to riches story in the smuggler frame and facing people like Jabba the Hutt and, of course, his rival, along with Lando, Boba the Fett as well. What are your thoughts on that series of sort of giving this foundation for this really cynical but great heroic character?
Well, this was a great series A.C. Crispin did that really flushed out a backstory that was alluded to in many different ways, whether it was comics or fan theories or comments made by either Lucas or other people, and we finally got to see what it was like for Han Solo. Whether you kind of get he's this this kid that's kind of a beggar on the streets, a thief on the streets, and then eventually stuff starts to happen for him, and he learns more about other cultures. And then he gets into his smuggling years and with early stuff with Jabba the Hutt, and then you kind of start to see the turn where he finally meets up with Chewbacca and starts to make that turn towards against Empire stuff, and starts going towards as because it's called the Rebel Dawn. But what I thought was interesting about this series that I learned at the time, and I was a little disappointed, but then I found out the reason why was that in this series, you do not get a scene of how Han Solo actually freed Chewbacca from the Empire. Because this was a rumor and something that has been mentioned for so many years. And I found out through interviews with the author and among other things was that there were several things that were off topic regarding George Lucas's agenda towards the novels. He didn't really, follow the people that were writing the novels. He didn't really care about those stories. He let the Lucas Publishing Company do what they want because they were producing good stuff that was making money. But there were certain things that were off topic that they could not, or off the board, they couldn't discuss, and that was one of them because I think that that was a story he wanted to tell. That was the message that I got, was that eventually we were going to get something from Lucas himself telling that story, and also, if any, a backstory of Yoda's species. That was off limits too. No one could even touch that, But I thought this was a great young Han Solo trilogy, and this was the canon for him for the longest time, and it was written really, really well. I was into the audiobooks, and I remember getting those on audio cassette because I was more stimulated. I loved audio, I loved visuals, and I listened to those over and over again, and that was a great trilogy.
It was a great era. Now, Kyle, I've got to ask you too. Obviously, audiobooks are a big way of sort of finding time to read, I think, is the big thing. One of them for me was the NPR, what you guys call over there the National Public Radio, I think it is, where obviously we had Star Wars brought to us by Brian Daley, which actually here on the network we're going to be covering in a couple of weeks' time. But one of the great things about it, we got a different Han Solo. We got one played by the actor Perry King in that series, and he sort of intoned the character even more cynically than Harrison Ford, but in such a way that it lived well within the sphere of the audio drama. Do you remember those NPR radio dramas, Kyle?
It's been a long time since I've heard those, but I know that they are kind of in a little realm of their own in fandom, but very appreciated by the people who did listen to them. The thing that I do remember about them is kind of what you said, is that it was a little bit of a different portrayal of Han by the actor who was reading him, but it did fit, like you said. And what I kind of thought was, I think he gave Han a little bit even more of an edge than what Harrison did. There just seemed to be that little bit more edge.
Yeah, I've got to say, Kev, do you reckon that in that time they're looking for a bit more of a bleaker take on Han Solo with Perry King?
Okay, so first of all, the radio drama I know like the back of my hand. I remember listening to these when on NPR, National Public Radio, with my mom live. And then I remember getting them on audio cassette and then eventually on CD. And before, we just had Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and they were going to do Return of the Jedi, but then stuff happened and, whatever. And then finally, in the late 90s, they got most of the cast back together, and Perry King came back as Han Solo, and Perry King was great. Like Kyle said, there was a different edge to him. And because they were able to write more dialogue and flush out the characters a little bit more, Perry King did a great job with Han Solo, and so much that he enjoyed coming back and doing Return of the Jedi. And he was very charming the way that he read his character. And regarding being a little bit darker or edgier, he was able to bring some of that to it, but he was also able to be funnier too at times. And there's a great scene in Return of the Jedi where Anne Sachs, who also returned to play Leia, he rescues her from he helps rescue her from Jabba the Hutt. And there's this scene that they wrote when they're returning to the Millennium Falcon. And of course there was that famous cutscene you never saw where there was like there was a scene that was shot in a Tatooine desert storm. But this was them getting back onto the ship, and Luke's taken off on his X-wing, and then there's this funny little thing where Han Solo goes to Leia, and this is Perry King talking to Anne Sachs, and their chemistry was phenomenal. And Han Solo goes, so you gonna keep that outfit? And what's funny is they wrote that scene because we're all thinking it. And, Anne Sachs goes, we'll see. It was great. It was just extra great Han Solo character development. And when I think about Han Solo, I think about all the stuff that is canon and not canon, and it helps define this character.
Oh, definitely. And look, it was an interesting cast, I think, that's definitely, if anything, brought a real... I think reality to things like Clone Wars and Rebels later, where they didn't just get day players; they got a real cast of people together, more like a TV crew would on a sitcom or something like that. These are people that are always going to be working together. I mean, you had Mark Hamill, Billy D. Williams, Anthony Daniels, and we also had Brock Peters playing Vader. I mean, Brock Peters actually brought life to Vader in a very, I think, deliberately flat on the nose way that made him even more evil in some ways.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you right now, the interrogation scene in Star Wars: A New Hope with Princess Leia is a little uncomfortable to listen to because of how creepy he is as Darth Vader. And Star Trek fans will remember Brock Peters also as well as Sisko's father from Deep Space Nine.
That's right. Now, wasn't he in one of the theatrical films too, Kyle? I think it was either Voyage Home or he's in, maybe it was Final Frontier. I can't remember.
I think it was
Final Frontier.
I think it was Undiscovered Country. He was.
That's right. You're right.
He was one of the evil Badmirals or something like that. So yeah.
Hey, real quick, since we're talking about Darth Vader, quick. I just want to give a shout out to David. Rest in peace, David Prowse.
David Prowse left us. Yep.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get that quick shout out in.
Amazing, man. I mean, he's known for obviously Vader, but he's done so much more in the UK in film, and obviously also helped build Christopher Reeve into Superman.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
Now, got to say too, one of the big things about that audio experience was the Foley You know, when Perry King was as Han Solo and jumping into light speed and bringing out a sublight, all that sort of stuff added to the oomph of the characters in those scenes. And I think one of the great things for me was that Perry played that a bit more technical than Harrison did. I think there's something about that maybe he had, I have no idea, but background in at least the knowledge of piloting. I have no idea, but I could be onto something there, Kyle.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know enough about on that end of it, but definitely I can see where when you're playing that character, knowledge of piloting would be definitely a good thing, because in that aspect of it, to have that knowledge of piloting, no matter what you're flying, you have that sense of being in a cockpit handling something. And I think it definitely lets you bring something more to any kind of pilot character, whether you're flying a starship, an airplane, or a kite. it just does let you have a certain gravitas to you in the cockpit.
Well, Brian Daley was an excellent writer, and he was allowed to expand on the Star Wars script in a wonderful way, and that included developing the characters a lot more. And I don't know if he was a fan of the Han Solo character himself, but also the credit to Perry King for delivering it. And it was, what I liked about Perry King too is that he didn't try to copy Harrison Ford's cadence, the way that Harrison Ford would say words and stuff like that. He would say some of the iconic lines you saw in Star Wars from Harrison Ford as Han Solo, but he would kind of do it in his own way, and he was able to bring his own magic to the character.
It's just a very good point. One of the things, too, I think, with that experience is that we got, obviously, too, when Brian Daley had sort of put it together back-to-back, obviously Empire, and we brought the character of Yoda in, and we got a certain Mr. John come in to play Yoda, which is very interesting. There's, of course, John Lithgow, played the role of Yoda in that. But we didn't get Return of the Jedi for many years. Brian Daley was quite ill at the time, but still scripted it, put it together, but I don't know that he got to actually hear the final version of it. So a big hats off to those guys. While we're mentioning it, if you're into Perry King, go and check out the movie My Saga. Guess who might just be on that one? That is, of course, Blair Hiscock, our dear friend of the show, is in that, of course, directed by Adam Harris of My Saga, and they're both on that same podcast. But Perry King is in the movie and talks about his experiences on the NPR. It's quite a good little doco. All right, so jumping forward, folks, obviously we've got Han Solo become a bit of a house name, the coolest thing in Star Wars. If he was basically the Captain Kirk. If you said Captain Kirk, you knew Star Trek. Han Solo, you knew it was Star Wars when you're chatting about. What was your first big bit of merchandise there, Kyle, that you got of Han Solo as a kid?
Oh, it was the original action figure with the Millennium Falcon. That was a Christmas year Star Wars, and it was kind of one of those things where under the Christmas tree there was the Millennium Falcon, several of the Star Wars figures, a couple of the other vehicles. But yeah, I mean, what kid didn't want the Millennium Falcon and have Han Solo and Chewbacca? I mean, that was the toy to have.
We're talking about the holy grail of Han Solo merchandise. I mean, this is what we remember most for Star Wars back in Kenner's time, yeah?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like these bits of merchandise that we've all had in the past. I mean, I never had the Falcon as a kid, but I mean, Kev, if you had, obviously we've all got one piece of Han Solo merchandise we get from, whether it's the Kenner line or whatever. What was it that for you triggered that bit of nostalgia, no matter what you think of when it goes back to thinking of Star Wars as a kid? What was that bit of Han Solo merch?
I would say that original Han Solo action figure that the face mold looked nothing like him. And it had that black hair, and his arm that held the blaster had a little bit more of a bend to it. I never got the Millennium Falcon when I was a kid. Those are expensive, and I remember the action figure and stuff. But I remember the blast. There was I think there was an early blaster of his too. Mm-hmm. But when it came to merchandise, other than the figures, there really, I remember the one that I did have was the Empire Strikes Back Hoth Han, and I actually still have that. I saved it, and I played with that all the time, even though it was here in sunny Southern California. But I just thought he looked cool in that figure. And then I remember getting like the Return of the Jedi one and stuff like that. But it wasn't until like I really started collecting more in the '90s when they started reissuing, like the ones that looked like they were all on steroids, and the one of my favorites is the one that came with his frozen carbonite slab and him, and you could put him in it, that type of stuff. So yeah.
Now it's time to go down to the pub here with the Fantha from Down Under. Let's go grab a pint.
All right, folks, welcome to Here We Are in the Pub. The one, the only Fantha from Down Under pub. Here we're going to be chatting our final episode about Han Solo as told by Brian Daley. This is the third volume in the trilogy called Han Solo and the Lost Legacy. It's probably the best, to be honest. It's got everything you like about Han and Chewie, the kind of deals that they get on, the kind of greed that they always had, and also it's just a great ripping adventure. And it's quoted even in, this will be interesting for you, Solo, a Star Wars story, where you actually get, basically, if you look in the little scene where you get to see all the rewards and stuff like that a certain character has, Paul Bettany, you'll see exactly what we're talking about, because it's all about Zim, the despot, the mad tyrant. So, the story in this one is quite good, and it shows everywhere from the scum and villainy of the universe right up to, obviously, some of the rewards that are just absolute jewels and everything. So in this one, the basic summary is that Han and Chewie are back on the road and on hard times. The reward they got from breaking up the slavery ring in the last book from within the CSA, so the Corporate Secret Authority, has basically been blown over and used already. So they put together a smuggler duo with a later droid by the name of BLX-5 and a computer probe called Blue Max. And in this, they basically put together a job for 1,500 credits and puts them on the world of Rudrig. And it's basically a university area in the Tion hegemony. Here, we've got Han and Chewie come and meet this character by the name of Alexander Bajur, who's kind of, I suppose, like an old-timer smuggler character. And they passed him in the early days and had saved their lives once. But Bajur has also, like Han Solo and Chewbacca, gone to a stage in his life where he's also in not the best part. Let's put it that way. He's also in a time where he's short on credits and he's fallen on pretty hard times. But he has been working with the quasi-legal camps, or the mining, on the planet of Delalt, where he's come across two sisters, Husty and Lani Trudeau. Now, these two sisters, Lani is a pilot who's actually come across a recording disc from an old ship by the name of the Queen of Ranrawn. And this is a ship that was basically the treasure ship of Zim the Despot, which is basically a character from more than a millennia before. Cargo inside, obviously, too, is the Zim's basically got all this treasure, but he also has a huge cadre of warrior droids, or warrior robots. And they were lost in amongst the treasure of Zim's on the vaults of Delalt. So, this old smuggler friend wants to bring Han and Chewie on for a mission where he'll bring himself, along with Hasty, back to Delalt, along with a professor by the name of Skinks, whose job is to basically communicate to the navigation disc and to find the treasure. But Lani keeps the disc in a lockbox inside the vaults, but this is all before she is murdered, and this is by the mine operators inside the actual place itself. Bajur and Hasty then also claim the reward. They take it for themselves. Now, in amongst all this, Han Solo is also being pursued, hot pursuit, by one of the most famed gunmen in the galaxy. Now, this is one you won't have heard of from the movies, by Galandro. And of course, he's one that is tied to the corporate sector and is basically out for vengeance. So, shortly after arriving on Dalt, the operators managed to actually kidnap the Falcon itself, take it to the side of the mine, and find the disc. But Solo then hikes right across 700 many legions of kilometers to the land itself of Delation area to try and get it back. And among the way, they find survivors of the place. And this is basically a group of humans who have been hiding away in the mountains themselves, keeping the existence secret of what has been going on. So this is more than just a reward that Han Solo is going to find. He's come up and found, something even bigger. Again, he's done it with the slaves in the previous book. And this one, it's really, he's found something even more magical, which is finding humanity. So this is an interesting story. At heart, he wants to be famous. He wants to be, well looked after in terms of finding the spoils of war, or in this case, a reward from Zim the Despot's cater. But we're seeing that he's probably seen through his own friend, obviously, Alexander Bardou, that this is what's going to become of you if you don't do something about it. If you don't take a turn for something completely different. Now, the best parts of this is that whole it's a bit of an Indiana Jones, level to this too, with the whole Zim the Despot, this mysterious, ancient, reward out there, or in this case, they're not sure what the treasure is, but the cargo treasure itself is the actual army of robots. So having all these characters plus Hun and Chewie, it really does make for probably the most adventurous out of all the three. And I think Brian Daley's really honed his voice by this stage that you really get into it. And by the time he's finished these and moved on to Robotech in the Jack McKinney novels with his friend James Luceno, he's really refined it even further. So this book gets a definite 5 out of 5 for me. This is the best out of all three. I tell you what, folks, after we've done this, we're getting into NPR radio dramas after this as well. So I can't wait for it. It's going to be fun.
Well, that's all we have time for here tonight on the Fantha from Down Under. And we'll catch you next time. Same place, same channel, and of course, with more Star Wars news in a single file from FanthaTracks.com's Australian edition. That's right, we'll catch you next time. So, until then, may the Force be with you, and enjoy your Star Wars fandom. We'll see you next time.
Warning, no Tauntauns were harmed in the filming and recording of this podcast.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Making Tracks.